In the 1960s, Eastside High School in Paterson, New Jersey was one of the best schools in the area. Joe was a beloved teacher there, known for his kind approach to teaching and his fun classroom competitions. His students loved him for making learning enjoyable. But one day, his class was interrupted by fellow teacher Frank, who told them about a secret union executive board meeting they weren't invited to. Angry, Joe stormed into the meeting and lashed out at the members for constantly giving up on his reform ideas and caving into pressure from local authorities. Before moving forward, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It will help us keep bringing your favorite movie recaps. Fed up with Joe's confrontational attitude, the board decided to transfer him to another school. Fast forward 20 years, and Eastside High has become a nightmare. Once a shining example of education, the school is now overrun with chaos. Violence and bullying are everywhere. Teachers are disrespected and even assaulted, and illegal substances and weapons are traded openly. The building is in shambles, and most students can't even pass the basic skills test. This spells trouble for Mayor Botman, who fears the state will take over the school, a move that could cost him re-election. Desperate, Frank, now the school superintendent, and the school board attorney, Mr. Rosenberg, realize there's only one person who might be able to fix things, Joe. Although the mayor doesn't like the idea, he reluctantly agrees. Frank and Rosenberg visit Joe and offer him the principal's position at Eastside High. At first, Joe refuses, seeing through the mayor's selfish motives to save his own career rather than the students. But Frank challenges Joe, telling him that all his years of being labeled Crazy Joe haven't made a real impact and that he shouldn't let his potential go to waste. This finally convinces Joe to take on the daunting challenge. The following day, Joe arrives at Eastside High as the new principal. Wasting no time, he calls a meeting with the teachers and sets the tone immediately, declaring that only he will speak during his meetings. He demands a list of all students involved in criminal activities and orders the janitor to clean the graffiti-covered walls, assigning detention students to assist with the work. Mr. Darnell, the English teacher, is abruptly reassigned to be the assistant football coach. Joe also announces new security measures, including hallway guards to curb violence, and stresses that the teachers must focus on preparing students for the upcoming standardized test. The school must achieve a 75% pass rate, a major improvement from their previous score of under 40%. Later, Joe calls a school assembly and lines up all the troublemakers identified from the list on stage. On his way, he runs into Kenesha, a former student from his time as an elementary school principal, who is thrilled to see him again. However, when Joe takes the stage and asks for silence, the students ignore him, and the troublemakers mockingly laugh when he asks them to sing the school anthem. Frustrated, Joe sees no hope for reform and decides to expel all the troublemakers. He reassures the remaining students that their school environment will now be safer and warns them to take their studies seriously, or they could be next. The expelled students are escorted out by security, instantly quieting the rest of the crowd. That afternoon, Joe meets with the parents, facing backlash from Liana, the mother of one of the expelled students. Many other parents support her outrage, but Joe refuses to back down, delivering a stern speech about how a few bad apples can ruin the entire basket, emphasizing his commitment to changing the school for the better. Joe explains to the parents that he expelled 300 students to protect the future of 2,700 others and shares how he made a promise to God to save the school. His passionate speech wins over nearly every parent, but Liana remains upset. The next morning, Joe arrives at school to find a student, Sams, waiting for him. Sams, who was expelled, tries to convince Joe that he didn't do anything wrong. But Joe sees through the lie and takes Sams to the roof. There, Joe confronts him, calling him a coward for hiding the truth from his parents. He warns Sams that using illegal substances will ruin his life. Joe then delivers a chilling ultimatum. If Sams is so desperate to destroy himself, he might as well jump. Terrified, Sams promises to turn his life around. Joe gives him a second chance but makes it clear, mess up again, and he's out for good. Later, during lunch, Joe walks from table to table, listening to students and giving advice. He notices Ray wearing a suit and praises him for setting a good example. In contrast, Sams and his group look sloppy and start bothering a girl. Joe immediately steps in, makes them stand, and scolds them for their poor appearance in front of everyone. He then orders them to sing the school song. When they fail to know the lyrics, Joe punishes them with detention and announces a strict rule. From now on, every student must be ready to sing the school song on command, or face consequences. Joe meets with the music teacher, Elliot, to inform her about the new rule. She agrees but insists her students need to focus on practicing for their upcoming choir concert in New York, where they're performing Mozart. Elliot stands up to Joe, saying he has a problem with people challenging his authority. Joe retaliates by firing her and canceling the concert, insisting the students need to concentrate on their upcoming test. He replaces Elliot with Mrs. Powers, the school pianist, to lead the music class. Later, Joe has a meeting with Darnell, a student who feels humiliated after being sent to Joe's office earlier. Darnell accuses Joe of treating him like garbage and reminds him that the students deserve respect. But instead of addressing Darnell's concerns, Joe suspends him on the spot. Vice Principal Joan tries to reason with Joe, explaining that Darnell is more than just a coach and that no one understands Joe's methods. But Joe brushes her off, saying that's exactly how he wants it. When the day of the practice test arrives, the students give it their best while teachers closely supervise. Eager for the results, Joe sends Joan to the school board to get the letter directly. One morning, a student presentation for the local press is suddenly disrupted by chaos in the cafeteria. An expelled student sneaks back into the school and attacks Ray, armed with a knife. Joe quickly intervenes and questions how the boy got inside. Security suspects someone let him in from the inside. Furious, Joe orders all school doors to be locked and chained for safety. Later, Joe finds Kenesha upset. Although she's smart, her grades have suffered since losing her home because her mother doesn't want her. Determined to help, Joe takes Joan to visit Kenesha's mother. The mother reveals she had Kenesha as a teenager and had to sacrifice her normal life to work. Now she's struggling to get clean, leaving her in a difficult mental state. She thought Kenesha would be better off in child services, but she never stopped loving her. Joe promises to help her find a better job and a stable home if she takes Kenesha back and supports her studies. Meanwhile, news of the chained doors makes headlines, and Liana seizes the opportunity to file a complaint with the school board. Frank confronts Joe, criticizing his extreme actions and warning him that Liana is rallying a group to remove him. The fire chief is also siding with her. Frank accuses Joe of alienating everyone, just as he did with his wife, and insists Joe write an apology to Elliot and Darnell. If Joe wants respect as a leader, he must start by respecting others. Darnell is reinstated, but the problems escalate. The fire chief arrives at the school with the press, prompting Joe to threaten him with a bat to make him leave. Joan tries to voice her concerns about Joe's behavior, but as always, he refuses to listen. Joe feels disappointed when Ray visits him one last time to say goodbye, explaining that he has to leave the school for good. Not long after, Joe finds Sam's and his friends messing around in the bathroom. To discipline them, he makes them sing the school song. To his surprise, they deliver a stunning version that sounds like a church choir performance. The boys reveal that Powers taught them this version. Impressed, Joe goes to Powers, praises her work, and requests that she teach the entire school this new rendition. When the results of the practice test come in, Joe is frustrated to see that the students scored only 33%. Determined to turn things around, he gathers all the teachers in the gym and tells them their lack of effort is responsible for the poor performance. To improve, he proposes starting a tutoring program and an extra remedial reading course on Saturdays. However, one teacher points out the challenge of getting students to attend on weekends. Joe suggests a bold plan, visiting every student's home to involve their parents, and even inviting parents who can't read to join the sessions. Over the next few weeks, both teachers and students put in tremendous effort to prepare for the test, with Joe staying deeply involved every step of the way. But even as progress is being made, trouble brews elsewhere. Liana, frustrated with Joe's leadership, conspires with the fire chief and meets Botman to strike a deal. Despite Frank and Rosenberg's attempts to defend Joe, Botman silences them and agrees to Liana's terms. He will fire Joe, and in return, Liana will rally support for Botman's campaign. Later, in a bathroom conversation, Botman tells the fire chief that they plan to arrest Joe for the illegal chains after the test. What Botman doesn't realize is that Rosenberg is hiding in one of the stalls, and he hears every word. Rosenberg warns Frank, and together, they rush to alert Joe. Joe quickly devises a plan. When the security guards spot the fire chief approaching, they'll call Code 10 over the walkie-talkies, signaling the teachers to temporarily remove the chains. Later, Joan tries to discuss the progress of their reading program with Joe, but he brushes her off, saying he's too busy and that the vice principal should handle things independently. Frustrated, Joan confronts Joe at the end of the day, asking for a transfer. She calls him an arrogant bully who picks on those who can't fight back. Joan points out that many staff members feel the same way, but haven't left yet because they care about the students. However, she's had enough of his lack of respect and support and wants to leave. The next morning, before assembly, Joe hands Joan her transfer papers. During the assembly, he gives an inspiring speech, urging the students to change the school's bad reputation and prove they're not savages. He also acknowledges the teacher's hard work, crediting Joan for pushing him to see it. Moved by the speech and the united spirit of the school, Joan decides to stay. The students, energized by the moment, join in singing "Lean on Me," excited to prove themselves as the government test day approaches. On test day, the students tackle the exam with confidence. However, trouble brews as Liana pressures the school board to act, leading Botman to authorize the fire chief to obtain a court order. At school, Kenesha confides in Joe that she's pregnant, but her boyfriend denies being the father despite her insistence. Joe reassures her and promises to help find a solution. But their conversation is cut short when a guard announces the arrival of the fire chief, accompanied by Liana and reporters. Joe attempts to implement Code 10 to remove the chains, but the fire chief has a recording of the signal and arrests Joe for violating fire safety codes. With Joe gone, Joan is left in charge. That evening, during a tense school board meeting, Frank defends Joe's achievements. However, Liana counters by revealing that the school only scored 33% on a practice test, claiming Joe has failed. Just as the meeting reaches a boiling point, every single student storms in, demanding Joe's release. Botman knows it'll look terrible to fire a man with such strong support, so he approaches Joe, asking him to convince the students to leave. When Joe refuses, Botman ups the pressure, warning him that the police are waiting outside, and if the students riot, things could get ugly. Concerned for their safety, Joe agrees to speak to the students, not because he believes they're wrong, but to protect them. As Joe steps outside, Liana is trying to talk to the kids, but they're ignoring her and shouting about all the amazing things Joe has done for the school. Hearing them call him a father deeply moves Joe, but the looming threat of the police keeps him on edge. He takes over, reminding the students to stay calm and respect the law. Suddenly, Joan bursts in with game-changing news. The test results are in, and the school has passed. Cheers erupt as everyone celebrates. Joe, feeling victorious, tells Botman and the state exactly where they can go. He keeps his job, and the students cap off the night by singing the school song. Later, when graduation day arrives, Joe personally hands out diplomas, offering heartfelt and encouraging words to each senior, showing just how much he cares for them. That is how the movie ends. Please subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like. It really helps the channel. Thank you for watching.